Hi friends! Welcome back to Storytime with Teacher Strawberry. Who's that? That's me! And you're you! And I'm so glad you're here today because we're going to be reading a really cool book. It's called Fly High, Fly Low by Don Freeman. This story happens in the city of San Francisco. That's where I live. It's about two pigeons named Sid and Midge, and they're trying to find a safe place to build their house. Are they gonna be able to find a good spot? Let's see. Fly High, Fly Low by Don Freeman. In the beautiful city of San Francisco, a city famous for its fogs and flowers, cable cars and towers, there once stood an electric sign on top of a tall building. And inside the letter B of the sign, there lived a pigeon. Do you see the sign on the tall building? I see it. Do you see the letter B? Before choosing to make his home here, this proud gray pigeon had tried living in many other letters in the alphabet. Just why he liked the lower loop of the letter B, no one knew. During the day, the wide side walls kept the wind away, and at night, the bright lights kept him warm and cozy. The pigeons who roosted along the ledges of the building across the street thought he was a pretty persnickety pigeon to live where he did. "He's too choosy! He's too choosy!" they would coo. The only one who never made fun of him was a white-feathered dove. She felt sure he must have a good reason for wanting to live in that letter. Every morning, as soon as the sun came up, these two met in mid-air, and together they swerved and swooped down into Union Square Park, where they pecked up their breakfast. Mr. Healy was certain to be there, throwing out crumbs from his large paper sack. He would always greet them by saying, "Good morning, Sid and Midge. How are my two early birds?" All the birds in the city regarded Mr. Healy as their best friend, and he had nicknames for many of them. Sometimes he brought them hard breadcrumbs, and sometimes, as an extra special treat, day-old cake crumbs from the nearby bakery. Yum! After every crumb was packed up, the pigeons always circled around Mr. Healy's head, flapping their wings as they flew, which was their way of saying, "Thank you!" By noontime, Sid and Midge could be seen sailing high in the sky, flying into one cloud and out the other. Side by side, they glided over the bay until they could look down and see the Golden Gate Bridge. Sid would swoop and fly through the open arches just to show Midge what a good looper he was. Then, as the setting sun began painting the sky with a rosy glow, two tuckered-out birds would be slowly winging their way back to the park just in time for supper. One evening, after an especially gay lark in the sky, Sid invited Midge to stay and share his letter B with him. That's really nice of him, isn't it? It's nice to share with our friends. Across the way, pigeons were soon bobbing their heads up and down, cooing, "Whoever heard of birds building a nest in a sign? It'll never do! It'll never do!" But Sid and Midge went right on, building their nest as best they could. They used patches of cloth and strands of string and bits of straw, and gradually there grew a strong nest with a perfect view. Then, one misty morning, a few weeks later, just as everything was going along smoothly, something happened which was very upsetting. It occurred right after Sid had flown down to the park and picked up his breakfast. As usual, he had left Midge taking her turn sitting on the nest, where there were now 2 eggs to be kept warm. Suddenly, like a bolt out of the blue, Midge felt their perch give a terrible lurch. The buildings across the way seemed to sway back and forth. "It's an earthquake!" screeched Midge. That must be so scary. But no, it was even worse than an earthquake. Their sign was being taken down. One by one, the letters were being lowered into a waiting truck below. Midge followed, flapping her wings wildly at the movers, trying to let them know they must not take away her nest. But the men paid no attention to her until the tallest man stopped and shouted, "Hold everything! Look here, what I found! 2 eggs in a nest! No wonder that pigeon was making such a fuss."
"Well, what do you know?" exclaimed another man as he took a peek inside. "We'll sure have to take good care of this letter. Come to think of it, I know of a bakery shop that could use a big letter B. Anyway, we won't be throwing this one away. Come on, men, let's get going."
Down the hill they went and far out of sight, with Midge clinging on with all her might. You can imagine how Sid felt when he landed back on the cold and empty scaffold later that morning. He stood there dazed and bewildered, wondering where his sign had gone. Where was his Midge? And where was their nest with those 2 precious eggs? He looked around on all sides, but not a trace of his sign did he see. Suddenly, off he flew. First, to the waterfront. Possibly the sign was being loaded onto a boat. Sid was sure that wherever that particular letter B was, there too Midge would be. He looked high and he looked low, but not a sign of his letter did he spy. Next, he flew to the uppermost post of the Golden Gate Bridge. He thought perhaps Midge might have passed by that way. But no, not a feather did he find. While he stood wondering where to search next, an enormous fog bank came rolling in from off the ocean. Like a rampaging flock of sheep, the fog came surging straight towards him. Wow, do you see the fog rolling in? You can tell it's fog because the clouds are a little dark. When Sid saw this, he puffed out his chest and stretched his wings wide and cried, "Who's afraid of a little breeze? I'll flap my wings and blow the wind away." But the fog rolled silently on, and before Sid knew what had happened, he was completely surrounded by a dense, damp grayness. And the faster he flew, the thicker the fog grew, until he could barely see beyond his beak. Down, down he dived, hoping to land on solid ground. All at once, he found himself standing on top of a traffic light signal right in the busiest part of town. Once inside the green "Go" sign, Sid began fluffing up his wings, trying to dry them off before going on with his search for Midge. What Sid didn't know was that his fluffed up wings hid the word "Go," and no one in the street dared to budge. Soon, there was a roar of automobile horns. Beep, beep. "People certainly get awfully upset over a little fog," said Sid as he stuck out his head. Just then, along came a policeman, and when he blew his whistle, Sid flew out like a streak of lightning. At last, the traffic could move on. By now, the fog had changed into rain, and everybody started hopping aboard the cable cars, which is what people do in San Francisco wherever the hills are too steep or the weather is too wet. And that's exactly what Sid did. Under the big bell on top of the cable car, he found a perfect umbrella. That's the perfect size for him. If only the conductor hadn't shouted, "Hold on tight, sharp corner ahead," and then clanged the bell. The clapper of the bell hit Sid so hard that he fell overboard. In the street gutter below, all bruised and weary, he hobbled along, muttering to himself, "People! It's all people's fault." Oh, I wish I could give him a hug right now and tell him everything's gonna be okay. But then he began to think of the kind man in the park. Would Mr. Healy be there on such a terrible day as this? Sid tried to spread his wings and fly, but he was too weak. He would have to walk all the way back to Union Square. Fortunately, the park was only a couple of blocks away, and just as Sid hopped up onto the curb, he felt a gentle hand reach down and pick him up. Whose hand is that? The next thing Sid knew, he was inside Mr. Healy's warm overcoat pocket, where, much to his surprise, he found several sunflower seeds. Right away, he began to feel better. He could hardly wait to get on with his search for Midge. When he peeped out, he saw that the rain had stopped and warm rays from the sun were beginning to shine down. Mr. Healy talked to his friend inside his pocket as he walked along.
"Around the corner from here, I know of a bakery where we can get something more for you to eat," he said.
As they neared the shop, Mr. Healy noticed some men putting a large letter on the sign above the doorway.
"Wow, look at that! A new letter B!"
Out popped Sid's head farther. What was that he heard? It sounded exactly like a certain bird he knew cooing. Could it be? Yes, indeed! It was his very own Midge. She had stayed with their nest through thick and thin. Up flew Sid like an arrow shot from a bow, and oh, what a meeting! Such billing and cooing as you've never heard. And no wonder, for their 2 eggs were just about to hatch. Out came 2 tiny beaks, breaking through their shells. And out of the bakery shop came the baker and his customers. They all wanted to know what the excitement was about. Sid knew that his first duty was to find some food for Midge. So down he flew, and there was Mr. Healy already holding out his handful of cake crumbs. After taking the crumbs to Midge, Sid hurried right back down, and this time he circled around and around Mr. Healy's head, flapping his wings happily. And we know what he meant by that. Sometime later, when their old neighbors came flying by, they saw Sid and Midge peacefully perched in the lower loop of the bee, and the 2 little ones in the upper loop.
"Oh, those lucky birds," they cooed as they flew away. "Sid certainly did know what he was doing when he chose that letter B."
The end! That was an amazing story. Okay, my friends, guess what time it is next? You're right, thinking cap time! Get out your thinking caps. Where's mine? Found it! All right, friends, go ahead and grab your thinking caps too. You can use a hat, a shirt, a sweatshirt, or even a sock. Okay, my friends, now that we have our thinking caps on, I have a question for you. This is a memory question. What was the bridge's name that Sid flew high above in San Francisco? Great memory! Golden Gate Bridge. And is it golden? No! Trick question. I did not trick you. It's called the Golden Gate Bridge, but it's actually a rusty red looking color. That's the bridge that is famous in San Francisco. Here's my next question. If you were a bird trying to find a good place to put your nest in your town, where would you put your nest? Okay, maybe we have to pretend to be birds to know this answer. First, stretch out your wings. Stretch them out. Okay, I think if I were a bird, I would put my nest up in a very, very high tree. Where would you put yours? I love that! Okay, my friends, do you know what time it is now? Kiwi's Corner. All right, Kiwi, what did you think of this book? Wow, that's amazing. Even though he's afraid of birds, he still really had a great time pretending with us. That's the beauty of pretending. Whenever you don't want to pretend anymore, you just stop. And you don't have to be afraid. That's amazing. Thank you, Kiwi. Okay, my friends, I had so much fun with you today, and I'm so excited for next time. Have a beautiful day.